Welcome back to Outside Views EU. Today we're diving into a crucial topic, the EU's role in protecting human rights and promoting social inclusion. The European Union has long been a champion of human rights, not just within its borders, but globally. Human rights are at the core of the EU's values, guiding its internal policies and its international actions. But what exactly does this mean in practice? And how does the EU ensure that these rights are protected? So let's start with human rights protection within the EU itself. The EU has established a comprehensive framework for safeguarding fundamental rights, and this framework is anchored in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, adopted in the year 2000 and made legally binding in 2009 with the Treaty of Lisbon. The Charter covers a wide range of rights, including dignity, freedoms, equality, and solidarity. And these aren't just words on paper. EU institutions and member states are bound by these principles in all their actions. But human rights protection is a continuous process. The EU needs to constantly adapt to new challenges, from data protection to the rights of marginalized communities. One significant area where the EU has been active is promoting social inclusion. Social inclusion is about ensuring that every individual, regardless of their background, has access to opportunities and resources. And this includes combating discrimination based on race, gender, disability, and sexual orientation. To address these issues, the EU has implemented a range of policies and funding programs. And one of the key tools the EU uses is the European Social Fund. The European Social Fund supports employment, education, and social inclusion initiatives across member states. It is the EU's main instrument for investing in people, especially in vulnerable groups who face disadvantages. And the EU strategy goes beyond just laws and regulations. It's also about empowering local communities and organizations to foster social inclusion on the ground. Take the fight against poverty as an example. In recent years, the EU has made substantial efforts to reduce poverty and social exclusion through initiatives like the European Pillar of Social Rights. The European Pillar of Social Rights is a set of 20 principles aimed at improving working conditions, fair wages, and social protection. It's all about ensuring that nobody is left behind. But the EU's role in human rights and social inclusion isn't limited to its borders. Globally, the EU works to promote human rights through its foreign policies and aid programs. It uses trade agreements, diplomacy, and humanitarian aid to push for human rights reforms in other countries. For instance, the EU often conditions trade agreements on human rights commitments, and this ensures that countries benefiting from trade deals with the EU also work towards improving their human rights records. And the EU also supports international organizations like the United Nations and the Council of Europe in their efforts to protect human rights globally. So, why is the EU so dedicated to this cause? It all comes down to the belief that human rights and social inclusion are essential for peace, democracy, and sustainable development. A society that respects human rights is a society that is more just, more stable, and more prosperous. But the journey isn't over. There are still many challenges ahead. The rise of populism and nationalism in some parts of Europe threatens the program made on human rights and on social inclusion. Economic inequality is growing, and marginalized communities are still facing barriers to full participation in society. And this is why the EU must continue to work hard to protect the rights of its citizens and promote social inclusion. It's about creating a Europe that is open, diverse, and inclusive for everyone. And I'm not talking about migration here. A Europe where human rights are not just a concept but a reality for all. So what does the future hold? The EU is now focused on the Green Deal, digital transformation, and recovery from the pandemic. And these priorities also present opportunities to further strengthen human rights and social inclusion. The green transition, for example, must be fair and inclusive, ensuring that vulnerable groups are not left behind. The digital transformation needs to respect privacy rights and ensure equal access to digital opportunities. And recovery from the pandemic has to address the deep social inequalities that the crisis exposed. As the EU continues to evolve, one thing is clear: human rights and social inclusion will remain at the heart of its mission. And that's what makes the EU unique. It's not just a political or economic union. It's a union of values built on a commitment to human dignity, equality, and solidarity. And these are the principles that guide everything the EU does, both at home and abroad. And it's why the EU will continue to be a global leader in protecting human rights and promoting social inclusion. So thanks for turning in on to Outside Views EU. And if you found this video informative, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time. The next video is right here in the end screen.